So what is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is your boy Jay bringing us a brand new 2023 NFL tier making video. This one is specifically on the AFC. I'm going to be tier ranking every single team in the AFC based on if I think they'll make the playoffs, if I think they'll be in the mix for the wild card spot, or if I think they'll be out early, or if I think they're going to be absolutely terrible. Very excited to do this video. Football is coming up in less than a month now. I think we have our first preseason game in just a few weeks. I'm recording this video on the 23rd, July 23rd. So yeah, within a couple weeks, we should have the Hall of Fame game and then preseason kicking off. So I'm very excited for that, and I figured why not make a tier ranking video based on how I think the AFC will do. AFC is obviously the much tougher division based on statistics and kind of just common sense. A lot of very tough divisions, a lot of very great teams. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in this video, tier ranking all the AFC teams. Next video I do, it will probably be on the NFC, tier ranking how I think all those teams will do. But I wanted to start with the AFC just because it's a lot more interesting and it has a lot of great teams. So with the NFL coming back soon, I said in my last video, I'm going to start getting more active again, doing more tier ranking videos and prediction videos, record prediction videos, all that good stuff before preseason gets here and during preseason. And then once the NFL season, the regular season comes, we'll be good to go and ready to just kind of cover what's going on with the regular season. So hope you guys enjoy. If you guys haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. But without further ado, let's just get to the video. So we're going to start out with the tier terrible and work our way up all the way to who I think will be the 1 seed. Starting off with the terrible team, there's only one team that I think will really be pretty bad in the AFC, and that team is the Texans. Now, I will say, I'm going to change the color here. I will say I do think the Texans have a very bright future. I think they have one of the brightest futures in the league, to be honest, just with C.J. Stroud at quarterback with a pretty young offense and a really young defense as well. DeMeco Ryans as head coach, now a very good defensive-minded coach. I do think this is going to be a team that within the next year to 2 to 3 years is going to be in the mix, much better. If C.J. Stroud turns out to be a legit franchise quarterback for them, I think that will be great. But it's a very young team right now, and there still are some holes on this team. I do think they are majorly improved from last season with C.J. Stroud, with Will Anderson, who they took in the draft, as well as guys like Tank Dell, John Mechie's coming back from last year's cancer. I think it's going to be a great team. They are just a very young team. Jalen Petrie, the safety, very underrated secondary member in my opinion. Derek Stingley, who they took last year early in the draft. I think it's a great young team to build around, and I think DeMeco Ryans is going to build this team up to be a very dominant team in a few years. But like I said, it's just a very young team, and that happens when you have a very young team like that. It's gonna have its struggles, it's gonna have its problems, but I think DeMeco Ryans is going to work around that, and I think he's going to build it up to be a good team in a few years. But in the meantime, it's a young team. The offensive line still has some holes on it. The defensive front still has some holes on the interior. And the secondary, it's not perfect, but it's all right. So they are in a pretty bad division. So I wouldn't be surprised if they, did a little bit better just because they're not up against great competition. But at the end of the day, I don't see them getting more than like 5 or maybe 6 wins at best. Which is all right. I think they'll be good in a few years. They're rebuilding, but like I said, as of now, at least, I don't see them getting more than 5 wins max this season. Moving on, though, to the out early teams. These are the teams that aren't really in the playoff mix. Maybe they get like 7 to 8 wins max. They're not really in playoff contention at all towards the end of the season. Starting off, the first team, I have the Raiders. The Raiders are a team that I'm not very high on. I'm not very high on Josh McDaniels as a head coach, and I wouldn't be surprised if even halfway through the season they can him and they go to an interim head coach until the end of the season. I just am not high on this team. I think the defense is pretty bad. The secondary, it's a young defense. It's a young secondary, and they're up against a lot of competition with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. The defensive front is pretty good now with Tyree Wilson along with Max Crosby. I do think that's going to be a very scary part, but it's looking like over the last couple days, Josh Jacobs could potentially be holding out, who is a major piece on that offense. And if they lose him, that's going to be a problem because they don't really have anyone to replace him or proven back to replace him at least. So that will be a big loss for them if Josh Jacobs does indeed hold out. The good news for them is at least Jimmy Garoppolo did pass his physical test, I think today or yesterday, which was big news because I know people were concerned that he may not pass it and they would have had to release him. So Jimmy Garoppolo looking like he will be the starting quarterback this upcoming season for the Raiders. Like I said, I'm just not high on Josh McDaniels. I'm not very high on that defense. The offense is actually pretty good, and if Jimmy Garoppolo can even just be consistent as the quarterback, I do think it will be a pretty good offense as long as they retain Josh Jacobs as well. But it's looking like they may not. It's looking like he may sit out this season if he can't come to an agreement on his contract. So who knows what's going to happen there. Like I said, though, they do have a good receiving core. But I'm just not very high on them. I think, especially in the division they're in, going up against the Chiefs, the Chargers, even the Broncos. I mean, they're all tough teams, and I just don't see them getting more than maybe 7 wins at max. And I don't really see them being in playoff contention at the end of the season. Up next for out early, I have the Denver Broncos, another team that I think will be much better this season than last season. I think a lot of last season was to blame on Nathaniel Hackett and the horrible coaching job he did. I do think Sean Payton is a major upgrade from Nathaniel Hackett, obviously, but there still are some major holes on this team. The offensive line is still pretty weak. The defensive front is still pretty weak. And like I said, there have been improvements, but Russell Wilson, was the fluke just because of Nathaniel Hackett last year, or is it because he's getting older? Russell Wilson is 34. So, yeah, he is getting older, and he's not going to be as, mobility-wise, he's not as good as he was a few years ago. And so it's going to be interesting to see if Sean Payton can kind of fix him up and if Nathaniel Hackett was the reason for that, or like I said, if it is just age and he doesn't fit well with this Denver system. I'm still not very high on this team either way. Even if Russell Wilson is back to playing how he was in Seattle a few years ago, I don't see this team doing much. Like I said, still some holes on the offensive line and the defensive front. I think kind of what I said with the Raiders, they're in a tough division, the Chargers and the Chiefs. I don't see either one of them losing to the Broncos. I think they're going to get swept by both of them. I just don't think they are going to do that good, especially with this tough schedule. I don't think this Broncos team is going to get far at all. Like I said, kind of with the Raiders, best case scenario, maybe 6 to 8 wins. I'll say best case scenario for the Broncos, but who knows? Maybe Sean Payton can get in there and completely turn things around to a full 180. I just don't see that happening. Moving on, though, to the next team that I think will be out early is the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Colts, kind of like I said with the Texans, have a bright future. I think Anthony Richardson is going to be a star for Indianapolis, kind of like what Shane Steichen did with Jalen Hurts and turned him into a beast. I think he's going to do the same with Anthony Richardson, but it will be a process. It's not really going to be like a year one type of thing where he just instantly is a beast. I think it'll take a year, 2 or 3, kind of like with Josh Allen. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. He was on the bench most of his first year. And we could see Gardner Minshew start over Anthony Richardson. We haven't heard any confirmation on who's starting as of now. It sounds like it's pretty even between the two. So I do think that will be interesting to watch. Gardner Minshew is a little more consistent. I do think Anthony Richardson does have the higher ceiling for this year, though. Moving on to the defense, though, for the Colts, it was a bummer because they did lose Stephon Gilmore in the trade with the Cowboys, and then they also lost Isaiah Rodgers for, I think, at least the whole season because of the gambling suspension. So the secondary is looking a little weak. The defense is all right, but like I said, the secondary is kind of the main hole there with losing Isaiah Rodgers and Stephon Gilmore this offseason. I think the offense will be good. I think if, Gardner Minshew starts and he can be consistent, I think that'll be a big plus. Or if Anthony Richardson starts, I think it's going to be a lot of, great moments for the offense where he looks like a beast, but then there's going to be other moments where, he does something where you're wondering why did he just do that, and that's okay. But I do think this team doesn't get more than like 7 wins max. I think it's going to be a bit of an up and down year, but that's okay. Like I said, it's a developmental year, it's a growing year. And I think within the next year or two, Anthony Richardson will be a beast under Shane Steichen. Moving on to the final team I think will be out early, I have the Steelers. And this one hurts me to say as a Patriots fan. I actually think the Steelers are going to be one of the most improved teams from last year to this year. The only problem is they are in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL. The Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. And I don't see them beating any of those teams. It's a bummer because I do think Kenny Pickett's going to have a big year too. George Pickens going into his second year. They had a great draft. Joey Porter, Darnell Washington, and etc. The offensive line really got fortified this offseason as well, which was a big concern last year. And so I do think they are going to be majorly improved, but I think Matt Canada is going to kind of hold down that offense to an extent. Horrible offensive coordinator. And like I said, just the competition in that division in the AFC North, I don't see them beating the Bengals. I don't see them beating the Ravens, maybe the Browns. But even then, I think the Browns are going to be a much better team as well. So it sucks because as a Patriots fan, like I said, I think even as a Patriots fan, I kind of wish the Steelers could do better. I'm a Kenny Pickett fan, but it just doesn't seem that way with the competition there. And so I think this could finally be the year they go below 500. I know it's kind of been an iconic thing where they've been above 500, I think in like the last 20 years or something under Mike Tomlin, but I think we could see this being the first year where they go under 500. I think maybe like 8-9 is what I would give them. Not by much, not like they're going to tank at all, but I think like 7-10 to 8-9 would be realistic for them. Maybe they shock some people. Maybe they go into that division and they or just as good, but I just don't see that happening. So I'd say around 8 and 9 is what I'd give the Steelers. And I actually probably could put them in the mix, meaning like they're just kind of in contention for a wild card spot towards the end of the season. But I think at that point, they'll be a little too far gone with some of the other teams competing for a wild card spot. Moving on to the next category in the mix. This is basically the tier where I think teams will not make the wild card, but I think they will be in contention all the way up until week 17. They'll be in playoff contention, and then they'll be eliminated like the final week or two, and it'll be close. Starting off with my New England Patriots. I'm a big New England Patriots fan, and I'm also very optimistic, and maybe that's just my bias. You tell me in the comments below, but I look at the Patriots last year, finishing 8 and 9. They were just a few games away from making a wild card spot. You look at the Raiders game, one freak play, that was a loss. You look at the Bengals game, a fumble inside the 5-yard line, we probably would have won that game. And there were several other close games against good teams where, it was maybe like a drive or a down away from winning the game, or at least, sending it to overtime. So I think that there were several games last year where the Patriots could have won. They just didn't for whatever reason. The fumble against the Raiders, the fumble against the Bengals, those are the two I have off the top of my head, but I know there were a few other close games as well. And now you went from having a defensive coordinator, the worst in the league, as your offensive coordinator, now having Bill O'Brien, who at the very least is a consistently good offensive coordinator, so that's a big plus for this offense because the offense was the main struggle last year. You also added Juju Smith-Schuster, a good veteran kind of safety blanket. You added Mike Gesicki, who reportedly has been doing very well at training camp, and he is going to be a big part of this offense. Mike Onwenu is going to go back to right guard. The star right guard, he's purely going to be at right guard. Mac Jones, hoping to have a big year 3, which I think he will under Bill O'Brien now. And then you also look at the defense. You look at the defense that is majorly improved. Christian Gonzalez, Marte Mapu, and Keon White, all major additions in the first 3 picks of this year's draft for the Patriots. I think this team could definitely make a wild card. Now, do I think they will? Probably not as of now, but I definitely think they're going to be in the mix. And, last year it was kind of like they were in the mix, but everybody pretty much knew they weren't going to make the playoffs. I'm kind of expecting it to be like they're going to be in the mix, but people think they have a shot at making the playoffs. Like, I could see them going like 9 and 8 to 10 and 7. And I know that kind of sounds ambitious, and I know they're in a very good division, don't get me wrong, but the major improvements to this team that was this close last year, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if at the very least they're in the mix and they're fighting for a playoff spot in week 17. And then the other big addition was the special teams, adding a new kicker, a new punter, and some new they added additions all around. Special teams, even, I know it's not something that's talked about a lot. They were, kind of quietly bad at special teams last year. A lot of kickoff returns and punt returns that they allowed, but this year they added a lot of special teams guys as well in the draft. Amir Speed and the other guy, I'm forgetting his name, I'm blanking. But anyways, my point, the Patriots are majorly improved, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are in the mix at the end of the season. Next up, I have the New York Jets. I think the Jets are definitely also going to be a majorly improved team with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. The main concern for me is this this offensive line. It is a pretty bad offensive line right now, and Aaron Rodgers, he is 39. You want to protect your veteran quarterback, and it just kind of depends on how well they can do that and how well this offensive line can protect Aaron Rodgers. The other thing is Breece Hall coming off of his ACL injury, if he can come back and play how he was before. If he can, I think he's going to be in contention for comeback player of the year. He was a very dominant player and was in contention for rookie of the year before he got hurt, which was a bummer to see. So if Breece Hall can come back and kind of resume his dominant backfield like he was last year, then I think that will be a major addition. But typically running backs do take a little bit of time to come back and get to their old selves coming off of an ACL injury. So that is my main concern, is the offensive line and how quickly Breece Hall can return to his dominant form. I see them being in the mix. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they got a wild card, but as of now, I think they get beat out by a few teams just a little bit higher than them. Then we have the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Titans originally was a team that I was not very high on at all. At the start of the season, I thought they were going to get maybe like 4 or 5 wins max. I said they were going to be one of the worst in the NFL. I do take that back. Starting off, you got DeAndre Hopkins, which not only is great to get a true wide receiver 1 veteran, but it also takes some of the pressure off of younger guys like Nick Westbrook-Ikede and Treylon Burks. So I do think that receiving core will be a little bit better, at least now. The quarterback situation is interesting. I'm not sure who's going to be starting, whether it's Tannehill. I would imagine it is, which at the very least with Tannehill, you're getting a consistent veteran quarterback. If it is Will Levis, then I think that'll be a little more interesting, kind of like what I said with Anthony Richardson. He'll have a lot of, high upside moments, but then he's also going to have a lot of horrible moments where it's like, what is he doing type of thing. So that'll be interesting to see who starts for the Titans at quarterback. I think Derrick Henry is going to start slowing down behind that pretty bad offensive line, and he is getting older. I think he's like 29 or 30 now. I think he might be 30, so he is getting older. There were even some rumors that he may get traded before the season starts, which I think would be interesting. I think if I was the Titans, I'd be open to looking for trade partners with Derrick Henry, but see how that goes. Like I said, though, I think the offense is going to be okay at best. I think the main part for this Titans is two things. One, the defense, one of the best defensive fronts in the league, along with a very good secondary. And then also just being in a pretty bad division. I think they definitely go above the Colts and the Texans. So that definitely helps as well. And then obviously just a great defense. In the offense, I think they'll be at least okay. And then finally, we have the last in the mix team, the final team that I think will not make the playoffs, but I think will be close up until the end of the season. That is the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns, I think, are being one of the most slept-on teams in the league right now. The additions of Elijah Moore and Zadarius Smith on the defensive front, Elijah Moore to be the wide receiver 2 behind Amari Cooper. The other big thing is Deshaun Watson. I know a lot of people thought it was an incredible overpay, especially with all the allegations and, the fact that he may not even touch a football field again and all of that. Well, he finally played again last year. And yeah, it was not pretty. He did not look very great. But in my kind of case, or in his defense at least, I think considering all the off-field stuff he was dealing with and the fact that he hadn't even really touched the field in a few years and that it was a new organization, I can't really, blame him for that. So I think if Deshaun Watson can kind of turn it around this season, I think it's going to be a very good team. They have a great offensive line, a good receiving core. The defense is looking pretty good secondary. Like I said, Zadarius Smith added to the defensive front. So I think this Browns team could be a very good team. It's like I said, the only problem is they are in a very tough division. I don't see them beating the Bengals. I do see them probably beating the Steelers. And then in terms of the Ravens, I think I could see them splitting. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure where I see that 2-game stretch going for them. But like I said, I think they're going to be much better than they were last year. I see them just missing out on the playoffs, and I'll even put them up front just because I think they'll be that close. But I could see it like 9-8, 10-7 type thing where they lose it to like a tie game with someone. So, or like a tie record. That's what I mean. But I think the Browns are going to be the closest, but I do think they will just miss out on the playoffs. So now we are going to go to the teams that I think will make the wild card, not win the division, but teams that I think will make the wild card, starting off with the Miami Dolphins. Now, in a previous one I was doing when I was kind of making this tier list to see what I would rank every team, where I would rank them, I actually originally put them in beating the AFC East out to win the division. I could very well see that. I definitely could see the Dolphins winning the division as long as Tua can stay healthy and that offensive line can protect them. I think Tua is going to be great if he can stay healthy. Like I said, great receiving core. Just alone, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, great receiving core. And then the defense is what I'm most excited for. The defensive front is looking pretty great. And then the additions to the secondary, Jalen Ramsey and Cam Smith in the draft to go along with Xavier Howard and Javon Holland, and then Vic Fangio at DC. So I think the defense is going to be really great. I think the offense, as long as, like I said, Tua can stay healthy and that offensive line can perform, which still a little shaky. We'll see. But I am excited to see the Dolphins play this year. I do think they definitely have a shot at the AFC East. But I think we all know who I have in favor of beating the Dolphins. Moving on there to the next team, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Again, same thing with the Dolphins. I think they could definitely win out the division against the Bengals. I'm very excited to see Lamar Jackson. He's kind of I don't know if I'd say he's my sleeper MVP pick because I don't think anyone's really sleeping on him, but I definitely think he could win the MVP this year. Coming back off of the injury, finally he has a good receiving core. Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers to go along with Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, hoping to step up this year and have a bigger impact. So I'm very excited to see this Ravens team finally. Like I said, Jackson has some weapons. The defense is looking solid. Lost a few key pieces, but for the most part, the defense is still solid. So I think the Ravens make the wild card. And like I said, though, I think they have a shot. I think it'd be more likely to see the Dolphins beat out the Bills for first place than the Ravens beat the Bengals. But I still think it will be a good matchup this year between the Ravens and the Bengals. Moving on to the the two final teams I have in the wild card. The final team I have in the wild card, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. And this is kind of my bold take of the video. I know some of you guys aren't going to agree with me, but I look at this Chiefs team, and I still think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Chiefs are going to be bad. I'm not saying they're not going to go anywhere. When you have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, along with Andy Reid as your coach, you're going to do great. But I think this is the year the Chargers finally take over the AFC West. And I know every year for the past 10 years, the Chargers get this offseason hype and really amount to maybe at best a playoff appearance. And I know I probably, sound like one of those guys right now who's hyping them up for not much. But I look at this Chargers roster, and I think if they can stay healthy, they are going to be one of the best in the league. And I'll get to that in a minute. But the Chiefs, don't get me wrong, I think they're great, but they did have some key losses. They lost left tackle Orlando Brown, which I thought was a bit of a bummer. And then they also lost edge rusher Frank Clark. Now, as well as Juju Smith-Schuster. And the main thing to me is the wide receiver room. Now, I know last year when Tyreek Hill left, everyone said the wide receiver room sucked, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. I understand that. But I think at a certain point, you need to have some sort of playmaker. And I believe right now Kadarius Toney is the wide receiver one for that team. So it's just not great. And I think if the Chargers can stay healthy, that defense is going to get the better of that Kansas City offense. And so it's going to be interesting to see. And again, don't think this is me saying the Chiefs are going to be bad. Don't think it's me saying there's no way the Chiefs win the division. I definitely see it. This is kind of a bolder take I have. But it's not so much the Chiefs roster is bad. I know that I said they lost a few key pieces, but to me, it's just how much better this Chargers roster is to me right now, in my opinion. So with that being said, the wild card, and this isn't in any particular order for the wild card, like 5th seed, 6th seed, 7th seed, just in a random order. But anyways, again, the Chiefs making the wild card really isn't a knock on the Chiefs. It's just me being very high on the Chargers. Moving on to the teams that I think will win the division. Starting off, we're going to go with the Buffalo Bills. Now, I do think the Bills could lose it to the Dolphins. I'm very high on the Dolphins as well, as I said earlier, but I think at the end of the day, the Bills are still the best team in the AFC East right now. Until they get dethroned, I'm just going to stick with that they are the best team. I think offensively, they had a lot of improvements. They did, unfortunately, lose their slot receiver, Isaiah McKenzie. However, they replaced him with Dalton Kincaid, a kind of versatile receiving threat type tight end. And then they also added Osiris Torrance in the draft for the guard position, who was a desperately needed piece on that offensive line. They kind of got torn apart last year, so the offense is looking good. The defense is still looking good. They lost Tremaine Edmonds, unfortunately, but other than that, the defense is still looking good. It's still retained most of their key pieces, so until the Bills get dethroned, I'm going to say they are the best team in the AFC East. But again, I could see the Dolphins flipping and taking that division. And I know some of you might say that's like the same logic I should have for the Chiefs until they get dethroned. But I am just much higher on the Chargers than I am on the Dolphins, if that makes any sense. But argue with me in the comments down below if you would like. Moving on to the next team, I have the Chargers. And I kind of talked about it, but I am just so much higher on the Chargers. It's not that I'm not high on the Chiefs. It's not that I'm not high on Pat Mahomes or Travis Kelce. It's just I am very high on the Chargers this year. And I know, again, the Chargers get this offseason hype every year pretty much and really don't amount to anything. But you look at this roster and you look at the amount of injuries they had last year. Rashawn Slater, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, Derwin James, Joey Bosa. I think Khalil Mack was even hurt for a little bit. I mean, they had so many injuries to so many of their key pieces. It was unbelievable. And I think now this team is even just with all those injuries and no additions, I think it's a much better team than they added Eric Kendricks, a good linebacker who I saw on, I think it was Good Morning Football. Someone said that he is going to be like the fountain, like the foundation piece of that defense. And then also adding Quentin Johnson in the draft. This Chargers team, if they can stay healthy, I think they are one of the best in the league. And I really believe that. Just the only problem is if they can stay healthy. If they can, this team is going to be one of the best in the league, and I'm just going to kind of put faith and trust in them that they do stay healthy. So that's kind of my reasoning there. But I just look at the Chargers roster compared to the Chiefs roster, and I just think that Chargers roster is 10 times better than the Chiefs roster right now. And again, not saying that the Chargers are definitely going to win the division. I know this has been said every year for the last 10 years, and they've only won it maybe like once or twice. But I think this is the year we finally see the Chargers take this offseason hype and they run with it, and they really are something special. But who knows? We'll see when the season starts. And then finally, for our last division winner, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not too much of a surprise here, I don't think. They're not in a very good division. The only real competition I could see maybe them having is the Titans, and even then it's kind of questionable. But I also think the Jags are going to be a good team defensive-wise. It's a young defense. They looked really good last year, and hoping guys like Trayvon Walker can take a big year two leap. And then for the offense, I think the offense is going to be much better. The offensive line has had some improvements, along with getting Calvin really entertaining. Really all of the key players from last year's offense. So I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a big year three. Calvin Ridley hoping to have a big year back. Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, guys like that all retain. So it's going to be interesting to watch this Jags team. I do think they are kind of quietly not being slept on, but I do think they are one of the more underrated teams right now, and I definitely could see them making a big statement to the league this year. But I'm very excited, and that is my final win the division team. And finally, we have the number 1 seed, the best team in the AFC. I have it being the Cincinnati Bengals. Offensively, they retain all of their key players, plus getting some additional stars in left tackle Orlando Brown, which I thought was a major addition, finally getting a solid left tackle to protect Joe Burrow's blind side, along with taking him away from Kansas City, which was a big deal, retaining all their key receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Irv Smith Jr., who they added in free agency after losing Hayden Hurst too. I think Irv Smith is pretty underrated, and if he can stay healthy, I think he will definitely be a solid target for Joe Burrow. Moving on to the defensive side, this is a side I'm really excited to watch. I think they've gotten much better defensively. They did lose Jesse Bates, their star safety, in free agency, which was a bit of a bummer. They added Myles Murphy in the first round to be a rotational edge rusher alongside with Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. The defensive front is looking good, DJ Reader and BJ Hill. And the secondary is where I'm excited to watch it. Chidobe Awuzie, I can never say his name right, but Chidobe Awuzie, Mike Hilton, and Dax Hill all kind of stepping up now with the loss of Jesse Bates. So it's a young secondary. It's a good secondary. I'm excited to watch them kind of make a statement and really prove that they are a good secondary. So that's it. I think the Bengals take the AFC. Now, let me know in the comments if you guys have anything you want to debate about, because obviously my list isn't perfect. Probably you guys have different opinions, so let me know in the comments if there's anything you guys disagree with, what you guys agreed with, and etc. But yeah, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Comment down below if there's anything you disagreed with, what you guys agreed with, and we can kind of talk about it. I hope you guys did enjoy. There will be an NFC version of this video coming out within the next couple of days, so make sure to like and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on that. And football season is coming up within a few weeks, so make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of those videos. I'm going to be a lot more consistent in uploading now that the NFL season is just a few weeks away. So thank you guys so much for watching. It's been your boy, Jay Lay, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.